Hi there, this is just a video on the BTEC Business Level 3 Personal Business Finance exam paper walkthrough. I'll take you through the whole paper and look at the mark scheme as well. Hopefully you'll find this particular video useful. So before we get started on the exam paper itself, let's just have a quick look at the grade boundaries so you know how to get the grade that you're after, and also to realise that the distinction is within everybody's reach. This is the grade boundaries from January 2024 series exams, and we're just focusing today on Unit 3 Personal Business Finance. And as you can see there, maximum marks is 80, so it's out of 80 in the actual exam. To get a distinction, you needed to get 48 out of 80. Merit was 35 out of 80. Pass was 22. And a near pass was an 11, and anything under 11, you got a U. But as you can see, hopefully, that to be able to achieve that distinction, you're not looking at the sort of, up in the 80-90% mark, you're looking at the following percentages. So to get a distinction on Unit 3, you only needed to get, on this occasion, 60%, and it doesn't really vary that much differently. So distinction is 60%. Merit is 43.75% to be precise, and pass is 27.5%, and a near pass is 13.75%. Now the idea behind this video is that you kind of really start to understand what the exam paper is about, and we're trying to push that grade up from, say, a pass to a merit or a merit to distinction. But hopefully just by looking at this you can realise that just by getting just over half, 60%, you can achieve a distinction. So it's not within the realms of impossibility. Definitely everybody can be pushing their grade up just by watching this video and revising and doing other techniques that I've been talking about in other videos as well. So just spoken about distinction, and if you would like to get a distinction, I'd say not impossible. You just need to know the syllabus. You need to know the exam is split into two parts. First part is personal, second part is business. You need to complete some past papers, practice as many as you possibly can, speak to your teacher about that and get them to download them. Practice those larger mark questions. There's only 6 marks and 12 mark questions that you really need to have an awareness of. There's an 8 mark question, I believe, as well. So it's those kind of larger mark questions. You don't want to be not hitting, at least sort of 10 marks on a 12 mark question for distinction. So definitely be doing that. Look at exam paper mark schemes if that's your thing, but we'll be looking at one in this one, so don't have to worry too much about that, but it's good to get to know mark schemes. Look at examiner reports if you've got time for that, and that kind of thing makes sense, and then you could also look at examiner reports, but I suspect you possibly won't. They're not the most riveting of reads, but examiner reports are helpful in sort of how to understand what the examiner's looking for. And then also make sure that you're attending all your lessons and listening to your teacher. I find that the students who are in my classes 100% of the time, then they're the ones that get the higher grade, and they're the ones that get distinction. So it's common sense just to say that if you attend lessons and that you're listening to your teacher's instructions, the likelihood is you're going to get a high grade than somebody who's not in the lessons and completing work. So the idea is that you obviously get to know the whole syllabus, and unfortunately for you, you're only going to be tested on a fraction of that syllabus in the actual exam. So in that case, you're going to need to know the whole syllabus, but it's important to understand that only 28 marks of the 80 marks are on personal finance, and 52 marks are on the business finance. So you can see there that, like I say, you need to know the whole syllabus, but you're only tested on a kind of a fraction of it. So again, next up, just before we look at the actual exam paper, we talk about building knowledge and how to revise. Everybody has their own individual way of revising, but it is important that you have a full awareness of the syllabus to be able to revise effectively. One of the things that we do with topics in class is we do this. We look at the topic itself, we try to understand how it relates to the exam paper. We look at the advantages of the topic and perhaps the disadvantages to give us a broader understanding, and then also look and see if there is any kind of broader knowledge that we can add to the topic to give us a better understanding. So let's take a topic from the exam paper, or syllabus I should say, sorry. Credit card. How does that relate to the exam? Well, we know that it drops into both categories, that you can have a personal credit card and also businesses have their own credit cards as well. And we know that it's a method of payment, so it drops under that category. There are advantages, of course, to having a credit card and disadvantages as well. Advantages are that it's a convenient way to pay for goods and services. It can also build up your credit rating so long as you pay back your credit card on time. Can be used as an emergency fund, so it's kind of always there and available to you so long as you haven't overspent and you're within the agreed credit limit from the bank. Rewards and perks. Sometimes some credit card companies offer cashback or point system, and obviously those are considered to be rewards and perks. And also a credit card can monitor and track your spending. There are just some advantages. Of course, there could be others, as I'm sure there are. Disadvantages then, some here. Interest charges for not paying back in full. So if you don't pay back your credit card each month in full and you only pay back a percentage, which is perfectly allowable, but you will pay interest if you leave a balance outstanding. There's a temptation with credit cards to overspend. If you've got a credit card with £1,000 credit limit on it, there is a temptation to sort of start buying things without sort of thinking about when you and how you're going to pay that back. You also open yourself up potentially to fraud as well by having a credit card, and also the impact on your credit score if you miss payments. So if you don't make a payment, that will be reported to the credit reference agency, and you may find it difficult to get loans and other credit cards and things like that in the future. Broader knowledge, just a sort of couple of examples of broader knowledge. So interest rates can vary from card to card. So you can have a high interest rate credit card for people with a poor credit rating, or you could even have a 0% interest credit card for sort of transferring of balances from one credit card to another. It's more secure nowadays because of you can add your credit cards to your phone wallet, so you don't actually have the physical card. The card is actually on the phone, so it's a lot safer that way. And of course, credit cards need to be used responsibly as well. But that's just an example of sort of how to revise. Take a topic, think of it like that. Then if a 12-mark question or an 8-mark question came up on credit cards, I'd say that looking at that screen there, you have sort of sufficient there to try and get yourself the full 8 marks. So let's have a quick look at the exam paper so you're familiar with what it looks like. So this is the exam paper from this January 2024, and you will put your details in there. So you'll put your candidate name and centre number, things like that, and you're probably familiar with that sort of thing. It does tell you can bring a calculator as well, so make sure you do bring a calculator on the day. Also make sure you show your workings as well in the exam. The calculator's there just to sort of aid the exam itself, and there you will be told what grade you've got out of 80. A couple of things to consider. The layout of the exam is the same every time, so what I'm sort of telling you now is roughly what it will look like when you come to do it, either in the May or the January in the future. So the January 2024 content looked like this, and it's important to note that it's in 2 parts, section A, section B. Section A is always the personal finance, and they recommend that you spend 45 minutes on section A, so make sure you're keeping an eye on your timings. And in that section you'll have 3 2-mark questions, 1 4-marker, 1 6-marker and 1 12-marker, hence why it's just 45 minutes. Then the rest of the time, the 1 hour 15 minutes, consists of the following: 6 2-markers, 2 6-markers, 5-marker, that's normally statement work, and I'll talk more about that in this video, like an income statement or a statement of financial position that needs to be filled in, a 3-marker, an 8-marker and a 12-marker. So you can see obviously there's more content in that business finance, hence the extra time. You just need to make sure that you're keeping an eye on the clock when you're doing this exam to keep your timings correct. Okay, so now let's get started on the exam paper itself. You will open up the exam paper. Here's your first question. It tells you it's section A, and that you should only spend up to 45 minutes on this section. Just to remind you once again, and your question is as follows: Identify two impacts on an individual of the rise in the rate of interest in relation to borrowing and saving. So they're saying that interest rates could rise for borrowing, interest rates could rise for saving. What are the impacts on an individual person? So it's a personal finance question. Of course it is, because it's in personal finance section, and it's worth 2 marks. So all you've got to do is identify those two impacts. What you can do now, if you're sort of playing along or filling it in as you go, you can pause the video now. I'm going to go through the answer directly in just a second. Okay, so let's have a look at the answer from the actual examiner's mark scheme. So this is what the examiners will mark your paper from. It's a screenshot from that. So let's have a look at what they're looking for. So it tells you here, it's got a repeat of the question, and it says award 1 mark for each impact identified, up to a maximum of 2 marks. So if you put 3 or 4 there, they can't award you 3 or 4 marks, because they've only asked for 2 and the actual question is only worth 2 marks. So don't waste your time, just give the examiner what they're asking for, just answer the 2 impacts. So you've got a increased repayment costs on borrowing, like loans, mortgages and credit cards. So that's true. Increased earnings on savings. So if interest rate went up, you'd get more money on your savings. You're more likely to save if there's a higher rate of interest. Less or more disposable income, so less money if you're having to pay more on your loans, or more money if you're receiving interest on your savings. You're more likely to get into uncontrollable debt as well if you're having to pay a higher rate of interest on your borrowing, and potentially you're more likely to default on your debt repayments. That means not making any payment at all because the interest rate is too high. And perhaps you're less willing or unwilling to take out loans because interest rate is higher. The important thing to note here is the bottom line. It says at the bottom there, and this is advice and guidance to the examiner themselves, and it says accept any other reasonable answer. So if you've put something else other than what's on that list, and the examiner thinks that that is also correct or a good point that you've raised, they have the authorization to give you the mark, okay, just so you know. So any other reasonable answer will be accepted. So let's have a look at question 2. Question 2 says state 2 ways an individual can maintain a good credit rating. So this is an important question. Can you answer it? If you'd like to have a go, pause the video now. Okay, so let's now have a look at the answer from the exam board. What do we know about credit ratings and why do they exist? Well, credit ratings are there to assess whether somebody's suitability for taking out credit, meaning a loan or a credit card. So if you have a low credit score, it's unlikely you're going to get given a credit card or a loan by a bank or mortgage. If you have a high credit score and where you've demonstrated where you have taken out credit and you've paid it all back on time, then your credit score goes up and you're more likely to be lent money by a financial institution like a bank, for example. But let's take a look at the answers. So if you're registered on the electoral roll, meaning if you're registered to vote at the property you live, that will help to improve your credit rating, believe it or not. But it just shows that you live at the property that you say that you're at. If you pay your bills, loans and credit cards on time, that will improve your credit rating, and you should avoid county court judgments, bankruptcy and insolvency, and you should know what they are because they were covered on the syllabus. But yeah, county court judgments and bankruptcy, that's sort of like the tail end of your debts where you've sort of not paid them and you're having to go to court to explain why you've not paid off your debts. Avoid unmanageable high levels of debt and applying for too much credit. So the more credit you apply for, that can have an impact on your credit rating as well. Bit of a game that you need to play when you're managing your own personal credit. Do not move home regularly and get a credit card builder credit card. So basically a credit card that starts off small and that you show and demonstrate that you can pay it back on time, and then it increases over time and improves your credit score. So a very, very important question, and something to think about just from a personal point of view about protecting your credit rating throughout your life, because the moment it's impacted on you, then it obviously becomes very limiting to be able to get credit, and that can be even sort of simple things like getting a mobile phone contract would become very difficult, renting a property, car loans, that kind of thing. So very important to protect your credit rating, and nothing directly to do with the answer. But anyway, that's the answer for this question, and let's move on to question 3. Question 3 then. So here we go. Explain one advantage for an individual of using electronic transfer as a method of payment. Can I just also quickly point out on this question, it says one advantage, but look at the actual number of marks the question is worth, it's worth 2. So if you only gave one advantage and didn't expand on your answer, then you're only going to get 1 mark, and that's 1 marked, 1 easy mark dropped there. So make sure that when you read the question, you do quickly note the number of marks the question is worth. Even though it says 1 advantage, it doesn't mean that. It means it wants you to explain it or give the advantage and expand on what you're saying. If you give 2 advantages, I don't think your examiner will award you the marks. Have a go at this question. I'm going to pause the video and then we'll have a look at the answer. So let's have a look at the answer for this one. It says here, it's instant, therefore it saves you time. Okay, so that is true. It is instant and it does save you time. There you go. There's your answer and there's your expansion. You don't need a bank card, therefore it's more secure. Okay, there's another one for 2 marks. It eliminates the risk of losing cash or cards. Yes, of course it does. So there's less chance of financial loss. Payments can be made remotely, no need to travel or to be present at the time that you're doing the transfer payment. And it's available 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which means payments can be made at any other time. It does say here, do not accept quick and easy or convenient on their own. So that's advice to the examiners. If you just said it's quick, it's easy, you're not going to get awarded the marks. So very important that you understand how this mark scheme works and what the examiner's actually looking for. All right, and it does say if you come up with something else that's reasonable and the examiner likes it, they will award you the marks. Let's have a look at question 4. Explain 2 advantages for an individual of planning expenditure. Quickly note there, bottom right hand of the screen, it is worth 4 marks to you. So you've got to give the 2 advantages and you've got to expand on those 2 answers that you're giving. If you give 4 advantages, the examiner's not going to award you the marks. They're only going to award you for 2 advantages and 2 explanations. It's in bold, it's very, very clear. Just make sure that you read the question carefully. And in just a moment, we will have a look at the answer. So here's the answer. Avoid getting into debt, therefore avoiding a legal action like bankruptcy, and maintain a good credit rating. All right, so if you plan your expenditure, you avoid getting into debt and therefore avoid further action being taken against you. More likely to achieve personal financial goals as more control over your expenses. Avoid overspending as you're more aware of your outgoings if you plan your expenditure. More likely to have savings if you plan your expenditure, which could mean money is earned in interest on the savings that you have. Definite advantage there. To make sure your expenses are paid on time, therefore no interest or additional costs are set up, or late payment fees and things like that. Again, accept any reasonable answer, but I think they're really good answers to a very simple question when it comes to personal finance. So this is where we now move on to the slightly longer, harder question. Not too hard. If you have a look at this and then we'll sort of talk you through it. I think the secret here is to read the question carefully and sort of think about it before writing your actual answer. And one tip that I always say on larger mark questions is to read the question, start your answer, write a paragraph, pause and then go back and read the question again, just to make sure that you're staying on track with the actual question itself. It's quite easy with larger mark questions to think you know the answer, start talking about it, and then 2 or 3 paragraphs in you're actually talking about something else. But just my tip, and here's the question. It's a 6 marker. So Connor is 26 years old. He lives alone in a house that he bought 5 years ago. He was made redundant from his job 8 months ago. He has no savings and he owes £4,000 to the bank for missed mortgage payments. Connor also owes £2,000 for utility bills and his credit card debts of £4,500. He recently sought help from Citizens Advice, who suggested that he consider applying for an IVA, individual voluntary arrangement. Discuss the advantages and disadvantages of Connor applying for an individual voluntary arrangement. So you've got to know your stuff here when it comes to this question, all right? And you've really got to analyse the scenario that the exam board are painting. So you kind of got to factor in his age. You also got to factor in his debts, whether they're secure debts or unsecured debts. Remember, if they're secure debts, they're secured on his property, okay, which could put the property at risk. Those kind of things as well. So you would have to do some reading up on this topic, or been listening when the teacher's telling you about IVAs, individual voluntary arrangements. They're kind of like the end of the road thing to do when it comes to your finances. It's the one before bankruptcy, basically, setting up an individual voluntary arrangement where you will pay less for your debts. But let's have a look, or you have a go at this question, 6 marker. See how you get on, pause the video, and then we'll have a look at the answers. So let's have a look at the mark scheme. What do they say when it comes to actually this question, the answer? So there's quite a lot here to consider. So as you can imagine, there would be on a 6 marker. There's the advantages for applying for an IVA. Okay, so you can have a look at that list. I'm potentially not going to go through all of them, but let's have a look at some of them. Having an IVA is an easy way of avoiding bankruptcy. So that is true. An IVA is a good way of avoiding bankruptcy. Some of Connor's debts may be written off, and Connor will have one fixed monthly repayment, as all his debts repayments will be combined. That is also true. Supports budgeting due to monthly fixed repayment and what have you. So these are a couple of things. Have a look at the others, and there's some disadvantages as well for applying for an IVA. And on a 6 marker, okay, what you want to be doing is you want to be raising 3 advantages and 3 disadvantages, and maybe a little conclusion line as to whether you think Connor should or shouldn't be going for the IVA. Disadvantages of applying for an IVA: Connor's credit rating will be adversely affected throughout the IVA and possibly for a period afterwards. Some debts cannot be included in an IVA, for example, court fines. And if Connor benefits from any unexpected funds, he may be expected to pay the funds into the IVA. All right, so there you go. That's the important bits out of the way. Did you get any of those? If not, it's a tricky question, this one, one that you would need to really read up on and fully understand. But there you go. There's an example of a 6 marker. So 3 advantages, 3 disadvantages. That would have got you the full 6 marks. Okay, so now let's have a look at the 12 mark question. This is the last question in the personal finance section. So Tia is 28 and works as a supply teacher. As such, Tia's earnings are often unpredictable. When Tia has paid her utility bills and her living expenses each month, she has between £100 and £400 left over. She would like to save this money. She has £1,500 in her current account. Her personal goals are to buy her own home and to save money for emergencies and for travelling. Tia has researched the following savings options available through her bank. So this drops into that kind of these different types of savings type of question. and it says here at the bottom, evaluate which option would be the most suitable for Tia. So what you're expected to do here really with a 12-mark question is you've got some data to work on, and what it's really saying is tell me what the advantages and disadvantages are of each, and I'll award you 3 marks for each area. So if you know about regular savers, the advantages, disadvantages. If you know about deposit accounts, cash ISAs and current accounts, then you will know which one to recommend for her. Okay, and her scenario. Remembering she's saving to buy her own home for the long term, so it might be better that she has somewhere where she puts the money away and has a higher rate of interest and that kind of thing. Noting, of course, on these on this table that there's different rates of interest, there's different terms. Okay, as to how long you need to perhaps invest the money for. There's minimum deposits, there's maximum monthly deposits to consider, and whether you can have instant access to your money. So once you've given the bank your money, can you have it straight away if you needed it in an emergency? So you need to evaluate that. You need to think about this and sort of just come up with the answer like I just mentioned, bearing in mind it's 12 marks. These questions just need a little bit of time spent on them and really reading the scenario and thinking about what could potentially be the correct answer. Doesn't necessarily always mean that your answer's wrong, by the way, as long as you're kind of justifying what you're saying and you believe it is correct. The examiner will understand that and perhaps award you marks based on the fact that you're demonstrating understanding of these different types of savings account. Okay. So let's have a look at the answer. And here we go. Again, I'm not going to go through all of it. You can see it on the screen there. This is the advantages, disadvantages, if you like, of each one. There you've got your regular saver, the deposit account, then you've got your cash ISA advantages and disadvantages, and then you've got some information on your current account as well. So just ones to have a look at. I would probably either open with your answer or certainly close with your recommendation just to secure those 12 marks and demonstrate as well that you really fully understood the question. There's no point just doing the advantages and disadvantages of each and then not actually giving kind of your recommended answer that's the most suitable for Tia. And so the examiner will have this what they call the indicative content for them to look at and mark your work at. But what they also have is this. So they will mark your answer in line whether it is a level 1, 2, 3 or 4 answer. And you can see that a level 4 answer means that the examiner is going to award you somewhere between 10 and 12 marks because it demonstrates an accurate and thorough knowledge and understanding of relevant information, and any gaps or omissions are minor. Evidence throughout the application is leading to a balanced evaluation. So basically what that means is that you could argue, you should say, well, I think the regular saver is more suitable for Tia because it has a higher rate of interest, it's only a minimum deposit, and she already has £1,500 in her account. The maximum monthly deposit is £200, and that fits in roughly with what her money is that she has left over each month, and she wouldn't necessarily want to put all of her money into the regular saver, and if she had any emergencies she could have access to her money. So you can kind of see the picture I'm trying to paint, and then at the end you would say at the end of it which one you recommend, and I would probably say the most suitable one would probably be probably the regular saver, but I'm just looking at this at making a choice quite quickly here. Yeah, maybe the ISA as well. You've got to evaluate it, but probably not the current account because it's a very low rate of interest there. All right, so that gives you a little bit of help and guidance on how to answer the 12-mark question. And that brings us nicely to the end of the personal finance section. And I hope that you have found that useful. So next up is, of course, the business finance side of things, and slightly more complicated. And this should have only taken you 45 minutes in the exam, and you now have an hour and 15 minutes in which to complete the rest of the exam. Okay, so let's now get started on section B. This is the business finance side of things, and you should spend up to 75 minutes on this section, which is 1 hour 15 minutes. Question 7 then, it says give 2 external sources of finance. A nice easy question to get you underway, and you've probably covered external sources of finance. Could you answer that? You only need to give 2. Pause the video. And now let's take a look at the answer. Here's your answer. So 2 external sources of finance, loads of them on the list there. You can have any one of those: loans, overdrafts, owner's capital, crowdfunding, mortgages, debt factoring, hire purchase, leasing, and what have you. Any of those would have done, and you would get 2 marks to get you underway. Next question. Question 8. Explain one impact of a rise in value added tax VAT on a cash flow forecast. Have another quick look at the total marks available. 2 marks here, but 1 impact. So that means that you've got to give the 1 impact and you've got to expand. So again, pause the video if you want to have a go at this question, and we'll go through the answer in just a moment. Here we go then. Here's the answer, awarding 1 mark for a correct impact identified and 1 for a developed point. Okay, so that's why it's worth 2 marks. Outflows would increase. That would give you 1 mark, leading to lower net cash flow stroke closing balance. That makes logical sense to me. If your outflows would increase, then you'd have a lower net cash flow, wouldn't you? And a lower closing balance. Lower inflow, leading to lower net cash flow closing balance as well. And higher inflows, leading to a higher net cash flow stroke closing balance as well. There you go. So any of those will do for your 2 marks there. Okay, next question. Question number 9. And state 2 current assets. Worth 2 marks, do you? If you'd like to have a go at this question, maybe pause the video now. Okay, and now let's take a look at the answer to this one. There we go. State 2 current assets. You should know what an asset is by now if you're going into the exam. And it could be any of the following. So if you'd put stock or inventory, inventory means the same word. So stock or inventory, 1 mark. Debtors or trade receivables. Okay, would have got you another mark. Bank, as in and cash, and prepayments as well. That would all be considered assets. And accept any other appropriate response. Okay, let's have a look at the next question. This is question 10. This is a cash flow forecast for home office creations for 3 months. You can see that it's for 3 months, ending the year of the 31st of March 2024. January, February, March, there it is. There's the inflows and the total inflows, and then the outflows, and the difference in the opening and closing balance. So you need to fill in the blanks basically on this cash flow forecast. Now you should know what a cash flow forecast is. Remember, it's just predicting. It's not actual. So it's predicting what the figures will be coming in and out of your business over, in this case, the next 3 months. So you've got to sit and work those figures out. And if you've done your cash flow forecasting work, this one should be easy. I say that loosely, but easy. It should be easy, and you should be able to get all 6 marks here. So let's have a look. I'll give you a moment, pause the video, do some working out, and let's have a look at the answer. So here's your answer, and there it is filled in, and your figures should look like that. Remember, if the figures are in brackets, that means it's a negative figure. Okay, so that's important and significant as well. If it's not in brackets, then you're suggesting it's a positive figure, which I suspect that the answer, it does say actually at the bottom there, answers must be correctly state if the figure is positive or negative. So you will lose marks if you haven't put it in brackets, because brackets suggest it's negative. Very important to note that, but that's the cash flow forecasting exercise. It's worth 6 marks to you. You need to understand that. Otherwise that's 6 marks dropped. Crucial. Okay, now let's have a look at the next question. It's one of those kind of continuation questions from the previous question. Got a scenario with it and a box that says show your working. So it can only mean one thing, a calculation question. So make sure that you do show your workings. Likely you will lose a mark if you don't do that. This question is worth 2 marks and then another 2-mark question to follow. Let's look at it. In February 2024, Arjun and Say intend to purchase a wood cutting machine for 15,500. This amount is shown as a purchase of assets in the cash flow forecast. They have just discovered that if they buy the machine, they will reduce their staff wages by 25% per month. Calculate the new closing balance for February 2024 if Arjun and Say purchase the wood cutting machine. There you go, and away you go with that. Question C is state one benefit and one limitation of using a cash flow forecast. Now, if you know your stuff and you've been doing some cash flow forecasting in class, not only will you know how to do them, but also you'll know what the advantages and disadvantages or limitations are of a cash flow forecast. So you should be able to answer that question quite easily. Or check out my revision video as well. I've covered that topic. Let's see what the mark scheme says. So if you're pressing play again now, here's the answer. So it says award 2 marks for the correct response, okay, of 3,458 in brackets. Accept the correct answer anywhere in the workings box, either with or without the pound sign. So it's not, it is okay to just put 3,458 in brackets. But it wouldn't be okay, I guess, if you didn't have the correct answer, obviously, sorry. And then, of course, or it says award 1 mark for giving the correct formula or the closing balance stroke opening balance, or award 1 mark for recalculating the new figure for wages at 4,650, or award 1 mark for calculating 25% reduction in the wages at 1,550. So basically what that means is you've got to come up with the correct answer and you've got to show how you got and arrived at that. That will get you the full 2 marks. Anything else where there's a kind of contribution in the terms of the correct answer, likely you're only going to get 1 answer. And then 10C, let's have a look at that. Benefits are all listed there and limitations, and you could have any one of those. So if you've got one of those, on each one, give yourself 1 mark. If you've missed off limitation, you're not going to get a mark. So make sure, again, you always attempt all the questions on any exam paper, because you never know, you might just get it right. So again, next up is section D of the same topic. Discuss actions that Arjun and Say could take to improve the closing balances in the cash flow forecast in the first 3 months of 2024. So how could they improve their cash flow? That's what the question's asking you. Do you know the answer? Improving cash flow question, and then you give your explanation and your extension. Have a go at this question. It's worth 6 marks to you. All right. So discuss is the option. So I wonder what the answers could be. Pause the video now if you're having a go at the question, and then we'll have a look at the answer. Okay, let's take a look at the answer. What have we got? So actions which could be taken to improve the closing balances for the first 3 months of 2024, 6 marks. You could increase inflows by increasing the selling price, doing more advertising or promotion, reduce period of credit sales allowed for customers, meaning that they've got to pay you sooner if they're buying stuff from you. Other appropriate methods of increasing cash inflows, reducing seller price, wider product range, etc., with relevant discussions of the advantages and disadvantages of that. And decrease outflows by not buying the wood cutting machine or delaying the purchase, renting cheaper premises, that could also work. So obviously you're referring back here to having a look at the cash flow forecast to be able to answer this question correctly, because obviously this refers directly to the scenario. Reducing other outflows could be another tip, and buy the asset using hire purchase or leasing, so getting it credit and spreading the cost. There you go, and that would get you 6 marks for that question if you did 3 on each. 3 on the increase, 3 on the decrease. Kind of obvious, but important to point out so you ensure that you get full marks. How are you doing so far? Are you totaling up your points, and how are you doing? Have you hit that distinction mark yet? So next up, another one of those complicated ones. One of those, here it is. So Farida runs a business called Camping Cuisine, and the business manufactures and sells camping stoves. Farida has a delivery van that was purchased for £15,650 on the 1st of January 2022. She has decided to depreciate this by 10% using the straight line method. So this is that topic of depreciation. And it's telling you here to complete the statement of comprehensive income for Camping Cuisine by calculating. And it's telling you the 5 things that it would like you to calculate there. And of course, if you get those right, you're going to get 5 marks. So you've got to really understand how the statement of comprehensive income works and where to do the calculations and what have you. So make sure that you're paying attention to that topic, or certainly revise that topic prior to going into the exam. Likely, definitely, you're either going to get a statement of comprehensive income or you're going to get an income statement work. Sorry, I do apologise. You're likely to get a statement of comprehensive income or the statement of financial position. One of those is definitely going to pop up, and as this one's popped up in January, likely you're going to get the other one. Anyway, so let's have a look at the answer, and here we go. So have you got these? Did you work that out correctly? If you did, congratulations, you got yourself 5 marks, 1 mark for each one. Definitely worth doing, definitely worth understanding it. Remember, if you don't do this and miss it out altogether, you just dropped 5 marks. So again, next up, calculation questions. Again, so we know it's calculation questions because we've got the box telling us to show our workings. 2 more calculation questions that connect back to the question previously, because it's still talking about Farida, and it says, and Farida has forgotten to add sales revenue of £3,000 to her figures for 2022. Calculate Farida's new profit and loss for the year. Show your workings. You're going to get 2 marks for that question. Calculate the markup in 2023. Show your workings. Do you remember markup? You need to look it up. Maybe watch the video again on it, or do some work on this to try and remind yourself. Pause the video now and try and have a go at this question. You may need to go back and have a look at the previous slide there. Okay, so let's have a look at the answer. Tricky questions. But only worth a couple of marks, but 5 crucial marks that could make all the difference. So important that you attempt it or have a go at it, or in other words, get it right. Have a look at the answer here. So it says award 2 marks for the correct response of 4,778. Did you get that? And then there's that combination of sort of if you had to go at it or you got halfway or what have you, they'll award you 1 mark and you didn't get the answer correct and what have you. But there you go. Show your workings, how you arrived at that. I hope you got that right. And then 11C, award 3 marks for the correct response of 28.9%, either with or without the percentage sign. So remember, markup is associated with a percentage. And again, kind of a bit of a calculations. If you show a little bit of understanding, you might get a mark along the way, but the examiner's looking for that correct answer to award you those 4 marks. So maybe go back, revisit that, because it's quite a tricky topic and you want to really fully understand that. I'm not saying this question is going to come up again, but it's kind of similar format. There's going to be questions around this and calculations maybe connected with an income statement or a statement of financial position, and you want to be in a position to be able to get full marks. So we're nearly there now. Here's the 8-mark question. So it's a continuation question based on sort of the previous questions. Farida's sales revenue has increased since 2022, but she feels disappointed with the overall performance of the business in 2023. So D is using the data from 11A and the relevant calculations and financial ratios, analyse how Farida might improve the performance of the business in 2023 with 2022. So this is a tricky question and definitely worth going back over past papers, practicing these type of questions to ensure that you fully understand them, what the examiner's looking for, and coming up with the correct answer and trying to get as many of the 8 marks as possible. I'll pause the video for a second, or you can pause the video, and we'll have a look at the answer in just a moment. So here we go. Here's the answer, and Possible figures are there, all in front of you, and it says here, Farida could do any of the following: increase sales revenue, increase markup, increase selling price, reduce selling price, reduce cost of sales, spend less on purchases or hold less inventory, okay, buy cheaper raw materials, buy bulk is also another one, and reduce expenses, sell the delivery van, reduce wages, reduce the telephone bill, and reduce utility bills. So not as bad as perhaps you might imagine, the 8 marker, but it's still crucial that you fully understand it and be able to do that. And you've got to suggest those ways or that she can improve the overall performance of the business in 2023. And also at the bottom there it does say accept any other appropriate response. So if you come up with something that's not listed there and the examiner likes it, you will get the mark. Okay, so now we have reached the last question on the exam paper. It's another 12 marker. It's the second one in the exam paper, and ideally you need to be hitting at least sort of 10 marks out of 12 on a 12 marker. Let's have a look at it. It's a continuation question from the sort of previous scenarios, and it goes like this. Farida has operated her business for 5 years. She has raised most of the finance she needed by using her own capital. However, she has an outstanding loan of £15,000 at 12% interest. Repayment of this loan is due before the end of 2024. Farida currently keeps all the profits she makes from camping cuisine. One of the machines that Farida uses to package her camping stoves keeps breaking down. She needs to replace the machine at a cost of £25,000 and is considering 2 options. Option 1, taking out a bank loan for £25,000 at 15% interest over 5 years, or option 2, obtaining £40,000 from venture capitalists in return for 50% profits for the next 10 years. £40,000 will cover both her existing debts and the new machine. The actual question then is evaluate whether Farida should raise the money she needs by taking the bank loan, option 1, or obtaining the £40,000 from venture capitalists in return for 50% of the profit for the next 10 years, option 2. Now this is one of those questions that relates to sources of finance, and of course there's bank loan as a source of finance at quite high interest, I hasten to add, or the venture capitalist idea. That's a bit like Dragon's Den, where somebody gives you some money and they take a share of your profits in return. So what do you think about this question? How could you get 12 marks from this? Well, I think probably how I would break it down is I would probably sort of come up with 6 points on option 1 and raising 6 points for option 2, or maybe 5 points in option 1, 5 points in option 2, and sort of using sort of a couple of marks at the end to do a good positive conclusion as to which one I feel as the only options. Both of them options are quite expensive options, aren't they? Really, when you look at it, the interest rate on the loan is high, and the commitment to the venture capitalist is quite long, isn't it? 10 years, that's significant. Will certainly eat into the profit and what have you. Looks like there's some calculations to be done, or certainly definitely some thinking about. Take a moment, pause the video if you've been playing along with this, and then just a second we will have a look at the answer. So here's the answer. So this is the content, and it's the comparison. So let's have a look. Compare 1, taking out the loan of £25,000 and 15% over 5 years, or obtaining £40,000 from the venture capitalists. Possible figures for option 1. Okay, so this is some figures that you could do to sort of work out how much interest potentially you would pay on the loan. And then there's some advantages for taking out the bank loan, disadvantages for taking out the bank loan, and advantages for the venture capitalists and the disadvantages for the venture capitalists as well. So you can see it's quite a complex question, but also quite simple. If you sit and read the content answer, you'll see that it is possible to build up 6 points or 5 points on the bank loan and five marks on the venture capitalist, and then rounding it off with a nice summary conclusion as to which one is the best option and telling the examiner exactly why. Okay, so that is the whole exam paper covered from January 2024. I hope that you found this useful. If you're still with me watching this video, keep revising. The more you know, the more you understand, the easier the exam will be. And also keep doing some past papers because they are really, really useful. And just to say, I wish you all the very best for the forthcoming exam on Unit 3, Personal and Business Finance.